She was just a young Apache girl when her life changed forever. At that time, she did not understand why the elders spoke in worried voices, or why the tribe packed their few belongings in such a hurry. The land had grown dangerous, strange men had been seen nearby, and food was becoming hard to find. The tribe decided they had to move quickly to protect everyone. In the confusion of that day, the girl was asked to wait near a familiar trail, a place she knew well. An elder told her gently that the tribe would return for her once the path ahead was safe. She trusted those words, without doubt. The people who raised her had never broken a promise before. She watched as the tribe slowly disappeared into the distance, their shapes growing smaller against the wide desert sky. She believed this waiting would only last a short time. She sat on a rock near the trail, holding a small cloth her mother had given her, feeling calm because she knew she was not truly alone. Her family would come back. They always did. The sun moved across the sky, and the heat grew stronger. She waited quietly, listening for familiar sounds. Every time the wind moved through the dry grass, her heart lifted. She thought it was footsteps. When birds flew low across the land, she thought they were signs that people were near. As night came, she wrapped herself tightly and slept lightly, sure that by morning she would see the tribe returning. But morning came with silence. One day became two. Two became many. She stayed near the trail just as she was told, afraid that if she moved, the tribe would return and not find her. Hunger began to visit her. Slow and steady, she remembered what she had been taught as a child. She found small roots hidden beneath the soil and gathered berries when she could. She drank water from shallow places she remembered from earlier travels. These skills helped her survive, but they could not quiet the growing fear inside her. Each evening, she looked toward the horizon, hoping to see familiar figures walking toward her. She talked to the empty air as if her family could hear her. She reminded herself again and again that they would come back. They must have been delayed. Perhaps the path was harder than expected. Perhaps danger forced them to wait. These thoughts kept her going when her body felt weak and her heart felt heavy. Days turned into weeks. Her hope began to feel tired, but it did not leave her. She marked time by the movement of the sun and the changing shadows of the rocks. Her small hands grew rough from work, and her feet became strong from walking the land. Slowly, she stopped crying, not because the pain was gone, but because she had learned that tears did not help her survive. The land around her became both friend and enemy. The desert was harsh, but it also offered lessons. She learned where animals traveled and where shade lasted longest. She learned which sounds meant danger and which meant nothing at all. At night, she stared at the stars, the same stars her people used to follow. She believed they were watching her, guiding her, reminding her she was still part of something bigger. Sometimes, she dreamed that her tribe returned. In her dreams, her mother ran toward her, arms open, voice full of relief. The girl would wake with a racing heart, only to face the quiet truth again. The trail remained empty, the promise remained unfulfilled. As months passed, her body changed. She was no longer the small child left behind. She grew taller, stronger, quieter. The waiting shaped her in ways she could not understand yet. She became patient beyond her years. She learned to listen more than she spoke. She learned to trust herself, because she had no one else to rely on. Still, she refused to leave that place. In her mind, leaving meant giving up. It meant breaking the promise herself. She feared that if she walked away, her tribe might return the very next day, so she stayed. Even when storms came, and the cold nights made her shiver. She stayed when loneliness felt heavier than hunger. She stayed because hope, even when small, felt safer than the fear of moving on. Other people might have thought her foolish. But for her, waiting was an act of love. It was loyalty. It was faith in the words spoken to her long ago. Every sunrise felt like another chance. Every sunset felt like a test she somehow survived. As the years slowly began to pass, The girl did not realize how long she had been waiting. Time had become something quiet and distant. She measured life by survival, not by days or seasons. She still looked toward the trail each morning, still listened for familiar voices, still believed that one day she would see the people she loved return. What she did not know was that the world beyond her waiting place was changing. Paths were shifting. Lives were moving forward, and while she remained still, holding on to a promise made long ago, fate was quietly preparing something she never expected. Her waiting was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The years moved forward quietly, without asking her permission. The young Apache girl was no longer a child. Yet her waiting place remained the same. The trail still cut through the land like a memory that refused to fade. Every morning, she woke before the sun fully rose, her eyes opening with the same hope she had carried since the first day. She listened, she watched, she waited, but waiting had changed its meaning. At first, it was filled with belief and warmth. Now, it was mixed with strength and silence. She had learned that survival required more than hope. It required action, patience, and understanding the land deeply. The desert had become her teacher. It spoke through signs that only those who listened carefully could hear. She learned how to follow animal paths without being seen. She learned where water stayed hidden even during dry seasons. She discovered how to protect herself from heat during the day and cold during the night. These lessons were not easy, but they kept her alive. Slowly, fear lost its power over her. In its place grew confidence, quiet and steady. Loneliness still visited her often. Some days, it felt heavier than hunger. She missed voices, laughter, and the warmth of being near others. To fight the silence, she spoke aloud to herself. She shared her thoughts with the wind, the rocks, and the sky. She told stories she remembered from her childhood, repeating them until they felt alive again. In doing so, she kept her past close, refusing to let it disappear. As she grew older, memories of her tribe became softer, like worn cloth. Faces were harder to remember clearly. Voices faded into feelings rather than sounds. This frightened her more than anything else. Forgetting felt like losing them all over again. To protect her memories, she created small rituals. Each night, she looked at the stars and named the people she loved. Each morning, she touched the earth and reminded herself where she came from. The land changed with time, and so did she. Rain came less often. The heat became stronger. New animal tracks appeared. Ones she did not recognize. Sometimes, distant signs of other people passed through the area, but never close enough for her to be seen. She stayed hidden, unsure whether these strangers were safe. Trust was something she guarded carefully now. There were moments when doubt crept into her heart. Late at night, she wondered if the promise had been broken. She asked herself questions she had avoided for years. What if the tribe could not return? What if they were gone forever? These thoughts were painful, but she did not push them away anymore. Facing them made her stronger. It taught her that even if the promise was lost, she was not. She began to understand that waiting did not mean standing still inside. Her body moved, her mind learned, her spirit grew. She was becoming someone new, shaped by the land and the long silence. She was no longer waiting only for others. She was learning who she was without them. Still, the trail remained important. It was more than a path. It was a connection to her past, a reminder of love and belonging. Even when she traveled farther to find food or water, she always returned before nightfall. Leaving it behind felt like closing a door she was not ready to shut. Seasons passed, one after another. She measured time by changes in the sky, by how the wind felt against her skin. Her hands became strong and steady. Her movements grew careful and sure. She could sense danger before it arrived. She had survived storms, illness, and hunger. Each challenge left its mark, but none broke her. At times, she imagined what life might be like beyond the waiting place. She wondered if there were still people who lived together, shared meals, and spoke kindly to one another. These thoughts were both comforting and painful. They reminded her of what she missed, but also of what might still exist somewhere in the world. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with deep colors, she sat quietly and realized something important. She had been waiting for years, but she was no longer the girl who was left behind. She had become a woman shaped by patience and survival. Whether the tribe returned or not, she knew she would endure. This realization did not erase her hope. Instead, it changed it. Hope was no longer tied only to the past. It began to stretch forward. Uncertain but alive, she still watched the trail, still listened for footsteps, but she also allowed herself to imagine a future that did not depend on the return of others. The desert remained wide and silent, but it no longer felt empty. It had witnessed her growth, her pain, and her strength. It held her story within its dust and stones. And though she did not know it yet, her long years of waiting were slowly guiding her toward a moment that would change everything. For now, she continued to live as she always had, watching, listening, surviving. The promise of the past still lived in her heart, but a quiet readiness for change was beginning to form. Something beyond the horizon was moving toward her life, unseen and unexpected. And when it arrived, it would meet not a helpless girl, but a woman shaped by time, patience, and unbreakable strength. The day began like many others, quiet and slow, with the sun rising gently over the wide land. The Apache woman moved carefully across the ground, gathering what she needed before the heat became strong. Her senses were sharp, shaped by years of living alone. She noticed small changes that others might miss. That morning, something felt different. The air carried a sound that did not belong to the desert. At first, she thought it was the wind. But the sound returned, steady and clear. It was the distant beat of hooves. Her body froze. For a moment, old hope rushed into her chest, sudden and powerful. Could it be her people at last? She stood still, listening carefully, afraid to move in case the sound disappeared. As the sound grew closer, she realized it was only one animal, not many. Her heart slowed, replaced by caution. She stepped into the shade, watching from a distance. A man on horseback appeared along the trail she had guarded for so long. He was dressed differently than her people, his clothes worn but unfamiliar. He moved with confidence, yet his eyes scanned the land as if he were unsure of where he was. She had seen signs of strangers before, but never one so close. Fear and curiosity fought inside her. She remembered the lessons of survival. Stay hidden, stay safe. But another voice inside her, quieter and braver, told her to watch and learn. She stayed still as the man slowed his horse, clearly surprised to find any sign of life in such a place. The cowboy had been riding for hours, following a path that faded in and out of the dust. When he noticed movement near the rocks, he stopped. His hand lifted slowly, not in threat, but in greeting. He spoke, though his words meant nothing to her. His tone was calm, careful, as if he understood that fear stood between them. She did not answer. She studied him instead. His face showed signs of a long journey. Sun and wind etched into his skin. His eyes held caution, but also something softer, something she had not seen in many years. Respect. He did not move closer. He waited. Time stretched between them. The desert watched in silence. Slowly, she stepped forward, enough to be seen clearly. Her posture was strong, steady. She wanted him to understand she was not weak, even though she was alone. The cowboy nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her strength. They could not speak to one another, but understanding did not require words. He placed his hands where she could see them. He offered water, setting it on the ground between them before stepping back. She hesitated, then moved forward and took it. The cool liquid brought relief, and with it, a small shift in trust. He stayed only a short time that day. Before leaving, He gestured toward the trail, then toward the open land, as if asking a question. She shook her head gently. This place was hers. It was where she waited. The cowboy seemed to accept this. He mounted his horse and rode away, glancing back once before disappearing into the distance. After he left, she remained still for a long time. Her heart raced, filled with emotions she had not felt in years. Fear, curiosity, and something else she could not name. The silence that followed felt different now. It was no longer empty. It was full of possibility. Days passed, and she wondered if he would return. Part of her hoped he would not. Another part watched the trail more closely than ever before. When he did return, she was not surprised. This time, she did not hide. She stood in the open, waiting. The cowboy approached slowly, bringing small items with him. Food, cloth, simple tools. He placed them down carefully, showing that he meant no harm. She accepted them without words, her eyes never leaving his face. Trust did not come easily, but his actions spoke clearly. They began to share quiet moments. He would sit at a distance, speaking softly, not expecting her to answer. She listened to the sound of his voice, finding comfort in its rhythm. Though she did not understand his words, she understood his intention. He was not there to take anything from her. Over time, she learned his patterns. He came and went, never staying too long. Each visit felt like a bridge between two worlds that had never touched before. She showed him where water could be found. He showed her small kindnesses she had almost forgotten existed. One evening, as the sun lowered, he spoke more seriously. He pointed to the land beyond the trail, then shook his head slowly. His expression carried sadness. She felt the weight of his meaning, even without understanding the details. He was telling her that the past she waited for might never return. The truth settled heavily in her chest. She did not react right away. She simply listened, watching the sky change colors. When she finally met his eyes, there was pain there, but also understanding. The cowboy did not press further. He respected her silence. When he left that evening, she knew something had shifted inside her. The waiting place no longer felt fixed in time. The past and the future stood side by side, and she was caught between them. The stranger from a different world had entered her life quietly, but his presence had stirred something deep within her. That night, she lay beneath the stars, thinking not only of what had been lost, but of what might still be found. The trail was no longer just a symbol of waiting. It had become a crossroads, and standing there, shaped by years of survival, she was closer than ever to a choice that would change her fate forever. The visits continued, but they were no longer uncertain or tense. With each passing day, the space between the Apache woman and the cowboy grew smaller, not in distance, but in feeling. Trust, once fragile, slowly became steady. He no longer arrived as a stranger. He came as someone familiar, someone expected. She noticed changes in herself first. She listened for his horse without realizing it. When she heard the soft sound of hooves, her heart reacted before her mind did. It was not fear anymore. It was awareness, and something close to comfort. Still, she remained careful. Years of being alone had taught her to protect her heart as much as her body. The cowboy brought more than supplies now. He brought stories, even if she could not understand the words. His voice carried emotion, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. She learned to read his face. When he smiled, the lines around his eyes softened. When he spoke about the land beyond the trail, his expression grew serious, filled with concern and honesty. One afternoon, he stayed longer than usual. The sun was high, and the heat pressed down hard on the land. He sat on a rock nearby and gestured for her to sit as well. For a while, neither of them spoke. They watched the land breathe under the sun. The silence between them felt different now. It was shared, not empty. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small object, worn and simple. He placed it in her hand. It was a tool, useful and strong. Not a gift meant to impress, but one meant to help. She understood this clearly. She nodded in thanks. In that moment, she felt seen, not as someone to be saved, but as someone who had survived. Then his tone changed. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He pointed toward the trail she had guarded for so many years. He shook his head again, more firmly this time. He spoke of places far away, of people moving on, of paths that no longer led back. Though she could not understand every word, the meaning reached her clearly. The promise she had held onto for so long was breaking. She felt it deep inside, like a quiet crack spreading through stone. Her chest tightened, but she did not cry. She had faced loss before. What hurt most was not the truth itself, but how long she had waited to hear it. She looked toward the trail, then back at him. Her eyes asked a question she was afraid to speak. He met her gaze without turning away. He did not pretend. He did not soften the truth. He simply nodded once, slowly. It was an answer given with respect. She stood and walked a few steps away, needing space to breathe. The land stretched out before her, unchanged and endless. This place had been her world for so long. Every rock, every shadow held a memory. Leaving it felt like tearing a part of herself away. That night, she did not sleep. She sat beneath the stars, thinking of the girl she once was, sitting on the same ground, with hope burning bright in her heart. She thought of the years spent waiting, surviving, believing. Or had they shaped her into the woman she had become? The next day, the cowboy returned, unsure of what he would find. She greeted him as she always did, calm and steady. But something in her eyes had changed. There was movement there now, like a door slowly opening. Over the following days, they spoke more through signs and gestures. He showed her images of other places, drawing lines in the dirt. He spoke of land where people lived together, where food was shared, where nights were not spent alone. He did not push her. He only offered knowledge. She listened, torn between two worlds. One was made of memory and loyalty. The other was uncertain, but alive. Each morning, she walked the trail, touching the earth as if saying goodbye without knowing it. Each evening, she returned with questions she could not silence. The choice grew heavier with time. Staying meant honoring the past, but also accepting endless waiting. Leaving meant risking the unknown, trusting someone she had known only a short time. She watched the cowboy closely, searching for signs of dishonesty, but she found none. His actions remained patient and kind. He never treated her as weak. He waited for her to decide. One evening, as the sky burned red and gold, she made a small but powerful move. She followed him a short distance down the trail when he left. Not far. Just enough. He noticed, but did not react. He slowed his horse, allowing her to walk at her own pace. They stopped where the trail curved out of sight. She looked back once, then forward. Her chest tightened, but she did not turn away. The past would always be part of her, but it no longer needed to hold her still. When she returned to her waiting place that night, she packed only what mattered. Not many things, just memories, strength, and courage, shaped by years of survival. She slept lightly, but with purpose. The waiting was ending. Not because the tribe returned, but because she was ready to move. By morning, the land felt different. Not smaller, not less important, but complete. It had given her everything it could. Now, it was time to carry its lessons forward. When the cowboy arrived again, she was ready. She stood beside the trail, not guarding it, but stepping beyond it. The choice had been made, not in fear, but in strength. The future waited, uncertain but open. And for the first time in many years, she was no longer standing still. The morning air felt different, lighter, as if the land itself understood that a long chapter was ending. The Apache woman stood quietly, looking once more at the place that had been her world for so many years. The rocks, the dust, the open sky, all of it held her story. She did not feel sadness the way she once expected. Instead, she felt calm. The waiting had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. When the cowboy arrived, he stopped a short distance away, unsure of what she had decided. She stepped forward without hesitation. That single step told him everything. He nodded, not smiling, not rushing her. He understood that this moment was not about him. It was about her choosing her own path. They began the journey slowly. She walked at first, leading the way, as if saying goodbye with every step. The trail that once meant waiting now meant movement. Each sound of the ground beneath her feet felt like a promise she was making to herself. The past stayed behind, not forgotten, but honored. The land changed as they traveled. The wide silence of the desert slowly gave way to signs of life. She saw animals she had not seen before, plants growing closer together, and paths marked by many feet. These sights filled her with wonder and caution at the same time. She stayed alert, but she did not feel alone. The cowboy rode nearby, always respectful of her space. At night, they rested beneath the open sky. He shared food and fire, showing her how to use tools she had never needed before. She learned quickly, her hands already skilled from years of survival. He watched her with quiet respect, understanding that she was not someone who needed saving. She was someone who had already saved herself. As the days passed, they began to understand each other more. They shared simple moments, watching the sun rise, listening to the wind, walking in silence. Words were still few, but meaning was clear. Trust grew not through promises, but through steady actions. When they reached a small settlement, she stopped at a distance. The sounds of people filled the air, voices, movement, life, happening all at once. For a moment, fear returned. This world was new, loud, and unfamiliar. The cowboy did not push her forward. He waited, letting her take in everything at her own pace. She watched people working together, sharing food, caring for one another. It stirred something deep within her, something she had not felt in years. Belonging. Slowly, she stepped closer, eyes turned toward her, curious but not unkind. She held her head high, carrying herself with strength and dignity. Life did not become easy all at once. She had much to learn, new ways of living, new rules, new rhythms. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when she missed the silence of the desert, the freedom of living by her own time. But she reminded herself why she had chosen this path. She was not running from her past. She was walking toward her future. The cowboy helped her find her place, but he never claimed ownership of her journey. He introduced her to others, then stepped back, allowing her to build connections on her own. She learned to trust again. Slowly, she shared pieces of her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Over time, she found purpose. She worked with the land in new ways, using both old knowledge and new skills. People began to respect her, not out of pity, but because of her strength and calm presence. She became someone others listened to, someone who understood patience and endurance better than most. At night, she still looked at the stars. They were the same ones she had watched for years, shining quietly above her. They reminded her of who she was and where she came from. She spoke the names of her people softly, keeping them alive in her heart. Leaving the waiting place had not erased them. It had given their memory room to breathe. One evening, as she stood watching the horizon, she realized something powerful. Her fate had not been changed by someone rescuing her. It had changed because she chose to move forward when she was ready. The cowboy had opened a door, but she was the one who walked through it. The long wait that once defined her life had ended, not with the return of her tribe, but with the discovery of her own strength. The years of solitude had not been empty. They had prepared her for this moment, teaching her patience, resilience, and courage. Her story was no longer about waiting for the past to return. It was about carrying the past with pride while building something new. The desert would always be part of her, written into her spirit. But now, her life held more than survival. It held connection, purpose, and hope. As the world moved forward, so did she. Not forgetting where she came from, but no longer standing still. Her fate had changed, not by chance, but by choice. And in that choice, she found a future that was truly her own.